Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video. So today's video I'm going to be doing my August wrap up, aka my NEWTs Magical Readathon wrap up. It is currently the last day of the readathon and I've already completed all my books. I did it, kids. This is the first time I've taken part in the Magical Readathon. I didn't do my OWLs in April, so because I wanted to do my NEWTs I decided to basically do both my OWLs and my NEWTs at the same time. I completed 7 exams for my NEWTs / OWLs, so basically what I did is picked the easiest job, and that was a seer. So for a seer I had to get an OWL in Ancient Runes, Astronomy and Divination. I had to complete 1 exam for each of those classes. For the NEWTs I just had to get an outstanding for Divination. So that in a sense is 6 exams I had to take. I decided to do 7 just so I can get 1 more OWL. So I took 4 OWL exams and 3 NEWT exams. 7 books, or 6.5 because one of the books I was like halfway through when August started. But 6.5 books in 1 month, for me, that is basically the best reading month I've ever had in my entire life. I'm so proud of that. Just give me a round of applause. So I'm going to be telling you guys all about this. I'm going to hopefully do it in order of the OWLs and the NEWTs and stuff. So I'll start with my OWLs and I'll start with the first book I read. So the first book I read for my OWLs was in Defense Against the Dark Arts, and I had to read a book that starts with an R, and for that I read Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I gave this book a 4.25 out of 5 stars and really enjoyed it. I bought it and picked it up because I knew Emma from Emma Books loves this book. So I decided in July obviously to pick it up and read it, and it was just so good. I really did enjoy it. I felt like this book was really character driven, which, hello, I love a good character driven book, or love a good character driven story. I felt like we really got to know the characters really well. I need to remember to give synopsis for these books because this book is, I always kind of think it's set in a different world, but I'm going to kind of say it's futuristic. I don't really know if it's a different world or if it's futuristic. I don't know. In this book you have 2 groups of kind of like superhero or like prodigies is what they call them. You have the renegades, who in a sense are the good people and who are trying to fight the anarchists, which are the bad group, the kind of the criminals. So the renegades have obviously banded together to try and fight the anarchists or any crimes that are happening within their world. What's more superior within this world because obviously they have their powers. In this book we follow Nova, who is an anarchist, and it's felt like the renegades betrayed her and her family through her family's death. So she feels like she's having to get justice for her parents and for her family through going against the renegades. We also follow Adrian, who is a renegade, and he's also fighting justice for his mother's death. His mother's death was kind of put off as a suicide when he doesn't believe that, so he's trying to investigate why his mother died, and there's a link with Nova that kind of might help him find that out. So these characters meet while Nova's trying to like kind of infiltrate the renegades, pursues from there, and it's so good, and it was just brilliant. As the book progressed it got really intriguing, and I just kept wanting to guess what was going to happen, when the book was going to go, what was going to happen to our characters. And I love both our main characters and how flawed they both were. It's because they're on opposite sides. They both believe that obviously they're fighting for the right thing, but because they're on opposite sides, all their flaws and maybe what stuff that they haven't really thought about and maybe stuff that they might be doing wrong is obviously brought out because they are opposing sides. There were great discussions between both characters which really showed how flawed these characters were. That's great, you gotta love a flawed character because no one is perfect. Overall I really enjoyed this book and cannot wait to read the next one. I have bought it. It's called Arch Enemies, and then the 3rd book, Supernova, comes out at the end of the year, so I'm super excited to continue on with this series, and I really love our characters and I love obviously this world that Marissa Meyer has curated. The next book I read for my OWLs was for Astronomy, and that was to read a book with the word star in the title, and for this I read The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. I wanted to read this month because the film came out this month in the UK. I haven't seen it, but I also just really wanted to read this book, and I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book. I read Everything by Nicola Yoon, and I didn't like that book as much as I wanted to and as I initially thought I did. I love this book so much. So this book follows our main character Natasha, who on this day, this book takes place in one day. On this day her family finds out that they are being deported that night, that they have to move back to Jamaica. Natasha was born in Jamaica, but at 8 years old or something she moved with her family to America, and her brother was born in America, and she's trying to find a way for her family not to be deported by the end of the day. We also follow our other main character Daniel, who is Korean. He was born in America, but obviously both his parents are Korean immigrants. His older brother, who's a bit arrogant, who they don't really get along with, is just being expelled or kind of kicked out of Harvard, and his parents are expecting a lot from him. His parents are expecting him to go to like Yale or something and to become a doctor, whereas Daniel wants to be a poet, he wants to be a writer. On this day that this book takes place, Natasha and Daniel meet, and Daniel says to Natasha, I'm going to make it that you fall in love with me by the end of the day. And because they've got kind of both opposing beliefs within life and with love, it's about their clashing kind of thoughts and their beliefs and how they come together and how they spend this last day together to kind of fall in love, and it's just so cute. I love Daniel's character and I really related to him in his kind of views on life. I also loved how within this book little events were always connected to each other and connected to the main story and connected to kind of the character's outcome. I don't know if I'm in focus, so if I'm not, I apologise. At the first half of the book, I didn't really like Natasha as a character. I think she was very cynical and very much like love doesn't exist and blah 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 blah. But as the book progressed, I did enjoy more as a character and I loved their chemistry and I loved their relationship, and I was definitely rooting for them by the end of the book. And I just adored this book and I really want to see the film just to see what it's like. I know it came out in America in like May, so if anybody in America has seen, or if anyone in general has seen this film, please let me know if it's like as good as the book. And the next book that I read for my owls was for Ancient Runes, and that was to read a retelling, and for that I read The Princess and the Fangirl by Ashley Poston. I read Geekerella, was it in July or was it June? One of those months. I think it was July, and I absolutely loved Geekerella, so picked this one up straight away just because I thought I need more. I loved this book just as much. I didn't think I would because sequels and all that stuff aren't usually as good. This was so good. I loved this book. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars, which is the exact same rating that I gave Geekerella. And this book, obviously, as I said, it's a retelling, but it's a retelling of The Princess and the Pauper. This book is a kind of companion novel to Geekerella, so kind of it takes place in the same world and follows one of the characters that we meet in Geekerella. You don't need to read Geekerella to read this one, but you can if you want. I did. That's what I did. I kind of felt like it did benefit the experience, but it's not obviously required. In this book, we follow Jessica, who is the kind of female main character within this big fandom called Starfield, and this kind of film remake called Starfield. And she doesn't really know if she wants to carry on being in this franchise, even though a second film is going to come out and people don't know her fate, and she doesn't really feel like she wants to be in the second film. At a convention, the script for the second film gets leaked and she feels like the blame is on her. While at the convention, she meets someone called Imogen, who is basically a lookalike to her, who looks exactly like her. She kind of says to Imogen, we should switch places so we can sort all this mess out. This was just so good, and it's so light-hearted and fluffy, and that's all you need to expect going into these books. It was a really quick and easy read, and I just adored it, and I blitzed through it. I read it in less than a week, which for me is really good. We've changed oh my god, I can't speak. We've changed positions, so I'm facing my window, so I've got better natural lighting. Hello, changing scenery. It was a really quick and easy read, which I just adored, and I just found myself falling in love with all these characters and loving every single character a lot. One aspect of this book that was discussed that I really enjoyed was sexism within fandoms, and it had references to like Daisy Ridley and Kelly Marie Tran, and I just thought it was just so good because that is something I see all the time on Twitter, and it really annoys me, especially recently with all the Marvel stuff and all the female Marvel stuff, and people, all the dude bros are having a go at Marvel, blah blah blah. I super enjoyed this book, and I'm just so glad I read it. And the last book that I read for my owls was for divination, and that was to read a book that's set in the future, and for that I read Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi. I have been meaning to read this series for like ever since I probably joined BookTube or kind of started watching BookTube, but I finally got around to it. What motivated me more to read it is obviously because there's a TV show in development, so I felt like I had to read it. I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and this follows our main character Juliet, and she's kind of been trapped in this cell for about 260, I think is about that, 260 days. She hasn't seen the outside for God knows how long. She has this kind of special power, which is in a sense she sees as a curse, because if anybody touches her, they kind of die. They die. I don't really want to say much else past that, but that is kind of obviously the premise of this book, and it is dystopia. I definitely see it as dystopia because we learn that the world outside is kind of gone to crap because of climate change and blah 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 blah. Straight from the get-go, this book was very YA cliche, like YA dystopian cliche, which I should have expected and kind of did expect, but after a while I kind of got used to it, and as kind of the book progressed and we kind of changed location, it started to get a bit better and I kind of started to like it a bit more. This book also does reconfirm that I'm more of a slow burn romance person when it comes to characters that I don't know. I need time to get to know these characters before they start falling in love, because if I don't know those characters, how am I meant to know if they're good together? How am I meant to know that I should start shipping them or that I should like them together or not? I need my time. And as we got further into the book, once again reconfirmed that I don't trust anybody in dystopian books, because even though our main characters are trusting them, I'm always like, you can't trust anybody. I think that maybe hindered my likeness to this book, because all the time I was just there like, do I even like you? Are you a good character? And also, I just don't feel like I liked many of our characters. Not that I hated them, I just wasn't in love with any of them. I've heard that as you go along, some of the main characters are like sweet cinnamon rolls who we must protect, and that's why it's pushing me to read it more, because I want some sweet cinnamon rolls that I must protect. But overall, I liked it, just wasn't like, oh my god, this is the best book ever. I will continue on with this series, it just wasn't my fave. Now moving on to my NEWTs. Obviously to get a O or an outstanding in divination, I had to get my acceptable, then my exceeds expectation, and obviously then my outstanding. So my acceptable in my divination for newts was to read a white book, and for that I read Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. I found this book in a charity shop and was literally audibly gasped when I saw this in a charity shop, because I've been meaning to read this book and Notes on a Nervous Planet for like forever. When I saw it I was like, yes please, I will take that, and I'm so glad that I did, because this book, honey, is kind of probably changed my life. This is a non-fiction, it's not a self-help book, but it's kind of a mix between low-key self-help and a memoir / autobiography. Trigger warnings for this book for anxiety, depression and suicide. But this book is basically about Matt Haig's own experience with depression and anxiety and suicide. As the book progresses, he kind of writes it in a way that can help the audience by saying, this is what worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. Maybe you should try this stuff out to see if it works for you, but doesn't mean it will work for you. Because there are times when he talks about how medication didn't work for him, but it can work for so many other people. So that's what I liked about this book. It wasn't like this was Bible and this was like God's word. He is saying like, this is what worked for me, so maybe it'll work for you, which I think I really loved. This was the first book that I kind of ever annotated. While I was reading it, I kind of just underlined some things that I just really thought would resonate and really help with me if I ever go back to reading it. And I think that would be really helpful again if I ever want to go back and read this, and also if I go back and read it I can underline more stuff depending on how my experience has changed. It did take me almost a whole month to read this because I didn't read it quickly. I know a lot of people do because it's quite an easy and quick book to read, but for me I had to do it in segments because I felt like if I read it too quickly it would have just been too much. I think I gave it a 4.5. Definitely recommend it if you think you can deal with it. It is a hard-hitting book in some sense. If you're in a good state of mind with mental health, I highly recommend it. My newts divination exceeds expectations. I was meant to read a short story, and unfortunately this one was the one I didn't like, and that was Doctor Who Logopolis. It is basically just a novelised version of one of the episodes of Doctor Who. Basically just one of the stories from 1981. I'm gonna try and say what it's about. Obviously if you haven't watched Doctor Who it might be kind of confusing. I'm not gonna go and explain the history of Doctor Who because ain't nobody got time for that. So I'm going to say it as if you know what Doctor Who is. Something happens with the TARDIS. The Doctor needs to go somewhere to get it fixed or something. He needs to go to this place called Logopolis to kind of fix the chameleon circuit, which we all know is broken. He has to go to Earth first and then he has to go to Logopolis. While he's doing this, the Master kind of just ensues disruption, and I don't even remember the Master barely being in this. That's all I can really remember. So it wasn't the most exciting story. I've learned that a lot of the old stories of Doctor Who aren't like the ones obviously in New Who. A lot of the old stories went over like 4 parts and they really expanded on it, whereas now it's just like one episode is one story unless it's like a big finale or something. At first I was really enjoying it and I just thought it was like, oh, this is brilliant, like it's Doctor Who. I love Doctor Who. You'll know I love Doctor Who because my channel name is Alonzi Reader. Maybe because of the writing style as well, because obviously this was written like 1980. I just got lost and got bored and I just felt it was really tedious to read. I barely remember anything to do with it. This is also the first episode or first story that Tegan is in, and I know Tegan is like a very well-known and I think maybe one of the longest Doctor Who companions. I barely remember anything to do with this book, so I just don't see the point in me talking more about it. And the last book that I read for my newts divination to get my outstanding, I had to read the last book I bought, and for that I read The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. At the time I compiled my TBR. This was the most recent book I bought because I bought it while I was in Poland. I think I bought it in the Jewish Museum in the Jewish quarter of Krakow. I've always wanted to read this book because I think I started reading it in year 6 while I was studying World War II, but 11-year-old or like 10-year-old Charlotte was just like, there's too much. I bought it now because I've always wanted to read it since, and I did, and I gave it again a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I don't really feel like I can say much about this book because I don't want to be like, this book was so good, because it feels weird saying that because obviously what this book is about, but it was a very interesting insight into the Holocaust and into this era and this subject of World War II. I feel like it's a very innocent and naive look because obviously it comes from a very innocent and naive narrator. With most stuff that you read about the Holocaust and stuff, it's all negative, it's all sad, but this was just, it's like a slice of life, which it sounds so weird to say all that because we all know what the context of this book. I think in general this book is very bittersweet because you see Anne just being a very normal girl of her age, despite, you know, having to go into hiding and despite her situation, and it was just something very bittersweet about that because you're like, this is so sweet, you know, she's just, you know, a normal girl, but then also because we know the context and some of the stuff, you know, she said throughout, kind of being like, oh, I can't wait till this is all over, so, you know, I can do this when I'm older, blah blah blah. It did crush my heart at some points, and once you get further and further through the book and you kind of get closer and closer to the end, I did, while I was like maybe 3/4 of the way through, I did look up the date or kind of around the time that they basically got found out. I think it was the Gestapo obviously infiltrated the annex. As I got closer and closer to that day, it was just more kind of like harrowing to read, because you were like, these are like the last days that like she has in like freedom in a sense. And at the end of the book, once obviously the last entries are in, get an afterword that kind of explains what happened afterwards, and you kind of learn how the last time that Otto, her dad, saw his family was obviously when they were separated between the men and the women and the children. It was a really, really good read. I really did enjoy it, and I think it's a very important read and one I feel like everybody should read. But obviously at the end of it, it is a very sad read. I did enjoy it. Highly recommend it, obviously, as I just said. So those are all the books that I read in the month of August for the NEWTs Magical Readathon. I'm super proud of myself for this. I can't wait to hopefully stay on this train of reading those books, but I don't want to jinx it because I start uni next month. That could take a toll on my reading. I am kind of close to my Goodreads reading goal, so I'm hoping to reach that. My goal is 50 books and I've read 43. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what you read in August, if you took part in the NEWTs Magical Readathon, what books you read for it. I just had a really good time taking part in it, and I would definitely do it next year. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.